Welcome to The Vinyl Guide, the podcast for record collectors and music nerds. Here's your host, the biggest record nerd of them all, Nate Goyer.
All right, everyone, it's Nate. Welcome to episode 540 of The Vinyl Guide, the podcast for record collectors and music nerds. And dear people, this week I'm welcoming a person I've always wanted to have on the show. You've clicked on us, you know who it is. Mr. Swami John Reis is joining us to talk records and more. I mean, you know Swami John, perhaps from his bands Rocket from the Crypt, Drive Like Jehu, Hot Snakes. Perhaps you know him as part of Spike and the Gimme Gimmes, or even from his record label, Swami Records. But one thing is for absolute damn sure, Swami John Reis is a record collector. And today we go deep into his, yours, and my nerdy and sometimes deeply concerning hobby of record collecting, as well as talking about some of the rarities from his bands and label. So get your beverage of choice, coffee, beer, whatever. Get ready for this interview. Just before we crack into it, I need to let you know of the special event April 4th that is happening at the Punk Rock Museum in Las Vegas, Nevada. It's the museum's 3rd anniversary, and there's a big gig happening there featuring Spike and the Gimme Gimmes, tons of other bands, and there's going to be some surprises there as well. Now, the Punk Rock Museum always throws a great party, and I'm sure this is going to be one to remember. It's their 3rd anniversary. They always go big, so make your plans and get your tickets now at thepunkrockmuseum.com. That's April 4th with Spike and the Gimme Gimmes, tons of bands, and who knows who else will show up. So there we go. Lock it in, people. All right, let's get into this conversation with a record collector and dead set legend, Mr. Swami John Reis.
I am here.
Swami John.
Is everything good on your end?
Everything's good.
Fine.
Everything's good. Yeah, still in Sydney. You'll probably see the sunrise as we speak. Well, I've always wanted to have you on the show, John, and I know we've spoken here and there and met in record conventions and various venues, but very excited to have you on. I do want to let people know there's a motivation here. Saturday, April 4th, the Punk Rock Museum has a 3rd anniversary. Spike and the Gimme Gimmes and a whole bunch of other great bands.
Yeah, they're gonna actually. I'm gonna be mummified, and I'm gonna be a permanent exhibit there at the Punk Rock Museum. So
they're putting a San Diego exhibit together, and you're the centerpiece.
I hear that Henry Rollins is starting a museum as well, so I hope that there will be some kind of bidding war for my corpse. I really do.
I hear they're digging a tunnel between the two so they could share exhibits through a specially built train system, high-speed rail. So, John, we talk records, collecting, that sort of thing. I believe that's right in line with kind of where your motivations are, yeah?
Yeah, it's unfortunate I have a disease.
I hear you. This is the support group, by the way. You've come to the right place. So let's talk about record collecting. Give us a state. What's your record collection like these days? Is it growing, staying still? Are you shrinking it up? What are you doing with it?
Kind of. It's not shrinking. It is changing a bit. I do find that I use some records that were once valuable to me, and kind of basically are trading those in for records, the ones that are worth something, trading them in for records that that I'm more interested in listening to now. So that doesn't happen a lot, but it has been happening the past like 5 or 6 years.
All right. So giving them these collectibles to new homes, and you're rediscovering new music through that.
Yeah, just basically what I'm doing is selling records that I don't think are worth much for lots of money, and then buying records for a lot of money that someone thinks are not worth that much money.
So tell us a little bit about your collection. Like, what are some of those? What are some of those records you're now letting go? The ones that you held on to for so many years.
Hardcore shit, hardcore stuff, the stuff that I don't need. I mean, there's still some records. I don't really collect the genre really, but there's still records out there that if I were to come across one, For reasonable, I would probably pick it up. But for the most, I'm not like buying a whole lot of hardcore. When I buy hardcore, I mean, I know that means something different to everybody, but I'm talking about like just early 80s, 1980.
Okay. So you amassed quite a few of those along the way. Mainly 7 inches, yeah?
Yeah. And that's pretty much all I buy is 45s. Yeah.
So your collection 45s to 33s is what, 80-20 maybe?
Yeah. 80-20. No, way more 45s. I would say like 95-5.
Ah, okay. When did you first get that record bug? When did you start being turned on by 7 inches?
Well, it came late, unfortunately for me. It came more from just kind of musically, just kind of being into playing different kinds of music and listening to other kinds of things, and kind of on that pursuit. It was a musical pursuit. It wasn't so much a record pursuit, but the music lives on the records, and you can't find the music anywhere especially at a certain time, if you didn't have the record. Even today, there's like records that that aren't on YouTube, that definitely aren't on any kind of streaming service kind of thing. So having the record meant that you had access to the music, which was always the most important thing. But about records, like when I first, with kind of being immersed in punk rock music, a lot of the records that we take for granted now as just being everywhere were very difficult to find. It was very hard to find a MC5 record. It was very hard to find a Stooges record. It's hard to find a Velvet Underground record, for me in like 1983. I mean, you could find it at the swap meet, but they certainly weren't in record stores. And yeah, a lot of that stuff was hard to track down. So it's kind of like these things that I think that they're so accessible now. You can just everyone has these massive record collections, basically, or music collections, I should say, on their phones with them at all times. That wasn't the way it was. So finding records, they were precious. So when you couldn't find it anywhere else, it didn't matter that it was fucking worth 50 cents. It was precious because the music was precious. And so just, yeah, it became a musical pursuit, finding the music. And that was a lot of times based on maybe one of my favorite bands I was listening to saying they were into this or that, and then kind of going down that path and following them that way. It's like, I didn't come upon the MC5 by listening to the 60s music and kind of getting there. I came there by listening to punk and then hardcore, and then some of those bands, then name checking them, bands like the Stooges and that, and going, oh shit, I should check this out,
Mm-hmm.
So as far as when, that's happened in the 80s, and then the 45 thing really kind of kicked in about like 20 years ago. And I wish I would have started earlier. I had, always had 45s, but it wasn't until I just kind of got reinfected by the record bug that it was like it emerged as this this disease, this drive to basically pursue, the great thing is about buying, collecting records and trying to find records is there are still records out there that really no one really knows exist or talks about. It's not like if you were to like collect comic books where every single comic book that's been made and every issue that's been documented. There's still 45s that are turning up, and LPs for that matter, but definitely 45s that turn up every year. They're records that no one has talked about or no one's really discussed, and they don't seem to be part of even the record collector consciousness. So that's fun to see that there's still things out there that people don't know, and that kind of, unfortunately, is another inspiration that drives this affliction. And I mean, I really do like just to look through records, even if it's fucking 300 boxes of crap. I really like to do that. It calms me down. My mind wanders. It feels healthy to me. It feels like something good, that I'm doing something that's it's good for me, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how else to describe it.
I subscribe to a bit of a theory on this. As humans, we have a hunter instinct bred within us from our lizard brain ancestors years ago.
Yeah.
And we don't really get to exercise it that much. And, hunting for records, I think, scratches that itch a bit. Being in pursuit, looking for that surprise. I mean, we could buy everything we probably want on Discogs and have it mailed to us. And what's the challenge of that? Let's go out and actually get dusty and kind of look through something and have these wonderful surprises. That's kind of the feeling that I tend to go for. I'll spend my weekends looking through boxes of used records and be completely satisfied.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. I mean, the frustrating thing comes when it's like, it's not that you don't find anything, but when you've spent all that time looking through something only to find out after the 5 hours of you kind of rummaging that a friend of yours had already picked it over about an hour before you got there. That's the part that really puts me off.
What are some of the, if you can remember, what are some of the best bargains you found in the wild in recent years?
Good question. I don't know. I find a lot of great records that aren't necessarily worth a shitload of money that I listen to all the time and that I'll play. And I'm happy, to not have spent a lot of money on those. I did find a couple years back, I was in Hawaii and I went to this shop that I kind of went to like every year. I would go to this place. It was just a vintage shop, which, if you know that those are notoriously the worst place to ever look for records or find records, because a lot of times people that have records there, they think anything older than 1960 is therefore worth a lot of money, kind of thing. So
yeah,
it's usually thrashed and not priced accordingly.
Or you're picking through a lot of Boz Scaggs and Mac Davis.
Yeah. But this wasn't that. Yeah. And the records were actually, the guy, saw me flip through a couple titles, and there was some Hawaiian music in there. But there was a lot of stuff that I could tell that it was probably from a radio station, a lot of promo copies and a lot of 60s and even some 50s stuff. And I inquired, do you have any more stuff like these 4 records? And he said, yeah, outside. And he had this collection from a radio station that had been outside for about 30 years and water damaged and mildewed, but records sounded pretty fucking good, pretty fine. And I don't sell records really. I mean, I will sell that one record of mine that has been mine for a long time in order to turn that into a piece of music, a record that I want. But I'm not a record. I don't sell. I don't consider myself someone who's finding something. If I see something that I could make a buck on that I don't like, I won't buy it just because it's a hassle to sell records. I mean, that's a whole different job. It's a whole nother thing, And if you're really going to go down that path, go for it, but I don't have that. I'm still trying to kind of, cling on to, this playing music right now.
You got enough things to do. Yeah.
So, so that one in Hawaii was great. I got a couple great records, some ones that at the time I had never seen before, didn't know existed. And then a couple friends had said, no, yeah, that's a cool version of that,
That's interesting you say that, because that's I've discovered in the last few years when I go to a record shop and I'm looking at things, and I'll always ask the clerk or the owner towards the end of the transaction, like, anything else back there? What else is interesting? And they'll, oh, this just came in. I love that line. Oh, this just came in. Or I was holding on to this or whatever, and it's generally something just gold. Yeah.
You have to fucking always ask, that's the thing. And especially with 45s, usually they're in a separate box somewhere, either under the counter or in the back. And then also with record stores, it's not uncommon for places to have certain records online that are not on the floor. Mm-hmm. So if they're kind enough to let you look through that stuff and they've been sitting on it a while, they might give it to you for what you consider not only a good price, but you're not paying obviously the shipping on it as well. So it's always good to ask. Yeah, I was recently in San Luis Obispo. That was the case. I pulled a couple records, and that line that I say all the time, do you have any more records like this? And he's like, yeah, we actually just got a collection in, and I haven't been able to price it yet, but we're going to probably sell it online. And he said, if you could be so kind to let me look at what you're comfortable with me seeing. and I ended up buying quite a bit of really cool Pacific Northwest, kind of garage stuff from him that was all in immaculate condition and ready for me to thrash it and play it, and carry it with me around the country.
What are some of your favorite record shops or even cities that you found or seem to have a higher strike rate for your tastes?
It's not intuitive to say this, to give you this information, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I will say I love Detroit. I love Pittsburgh. I find records there every time I go. Every time there's something, and I love the music from both of those places, and also they're both. For some reason, Pittsburgh was somewhat of a hub for distribution of getting records through that part of the country, and obviously in Detroit, you have not only the musicians and the labels, but radio stations, and there was an actual, there was actually a music industry there, so find tons of stuff there. And it could be stuff that people there see all the time, but you just don't see it in San Diego. I mean, I live in San Diego, so we see certain records here sometimes, but that are local, but we didn't have really, a music industry here. It was in Los Angeles, and a lot of the stuff happening here in San Diego was cool and interesting, but there just wasn't a ton of it, I guess you could say. Just wasn't a ton of it.
Are you into like radio promos? Or do those excite you a little bit more than regular presses?
Like, what do you mean by radio promos?
Like, or white label promos?
Yeah, I mean, they don't excite me more, but like, again, I'm coming to things by more the way of what has the music on it. I try to, because a lot of the music I listen to 50s, 60s, and sometimes early 70s, they were using styrene all the way up until the 80s. So a lot of times, I try to avoid the styrene pressing if there's a choice. A lot of times there isn't a choice. The record was only ever on styrene. That's just the fucking way it is. And sometimes the promo wasn't. The promo was on vinyl, and the legit release was on styrene. You see that, and then sometimes you see it vice versa, where the promo's on styrene and the original pressing was not. So I mean, I'm not one of those people that's like super down on styrene, just because it's like I said, some of my favorite records only exist on that material. That's all there is to it. I actually don't think it sounds as bad as people tend to think it sounds. I think it can sound very loud and good. It's just, the problem with it is it just can get fucked up pretty easily. That's
it doesn't have as long of a life. I remember as a boy, we got Cheech and Chong, Earache My Eye on styrene, and we played it till the styrene turned white. You could actually play those until all the material starts to disintegrate.
Do you know how to tell the difference between vinyl and styrene? Because I always find it really, because I think I know how to, and I think it's very easy to discern, but I always love to hear different people. And because sometimes you hear some wild stuff, like people hitting it and hearing it and says it has to sound a certain way and this and that. And a lot of stuff that's just kind of like, well, I don't know about that.
I can actually feel it, and I can just by holding it, I've got a 90% kind of like, I'm pretty sure this is styrene. But then there's a few ways to be able to look at the layers, like in the hole, and then also the way the label is affixed. I think labels for styrene had to be glued, or they had to be.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. That is the difference.
Yeah.
It is all about the label. If the label is a sticker on top of the record, it is likely styrene, because the way they make records, vinyl records, is the biscuit or the vinyl that is material that has been kind of melted down and turned into kind of like this malleable glob. Is that biscuit is then the label's put on top of that biscuit, and then the record is pressed. So that label is pressed into the vinyl, where styrene is a plastic thing making these like little discs, these pucks, and then the sticker is affixed afterwards. So that is the surefire way.
Yeah.
I believe. Some people have disagreed with me, and maybe they know more than I do. But as someone who makes records too, and has been to, maybe about 40 different places that actually make vinyl, that is how vinyl's made. They put the sticker on the biscuit, and then they press the stamper into it.
So let's talk a little bit about that, like how your collecting experience, what gets you excited about being a record collector, how that's influenced your label and you making records.
Because I can write off buying records.
It's a legitimate business expense now.
Yeah. It's like, I wonder if like drug dealers can write off like doing drugs themselves.
Oh, okay. Certainly ammunition,
I
that
wonder.
sort of thing.
No, it's fun. Records are great. I love records. I putting out records and buying records and seeing the way other people do things, it's the same thing as creating music, the way other people make their records sound, the way they approach their writing songs, the way they present it. The release of a record's the same thing. It's just like being able to, for me, 45s is kind of like, if there's a band I'm working with that wants to do a record a certain way, of course it's their fucking record. But for me, putting my own records, putting them in plain white labels without covers a lot of time, big hole 45s, I do that because those are the records I'm buying. The records I buy, that's what they look like. They look like plain white sleeves a lot of times with a large hole 45 inside, so that's kind of why I do it that way.
Now you said you've used, dozens of different pressing plants. What is it you look for quality wise, or when getting ready to press something? What do you look for in terms of a record plant?
Well, price is a big issue, because making records is very expensive. I sell 7-inch for $15. And if you would have told me that in 1988, that this record, a record's going to be a 45 is going to be $15, I would have, swallowed my fucking tongue, But so it's very hard to make any real money off of selling a records. That's obviously not the reason why we do it, but we, the way it works for a label my size is you have to get money from the last release in order to be able to fund the next release. I never have the kind of able to have the resources to kind of fund multiple projects at the same time, which is fine. That's the kind of the way it's always pretty much been. But I look for affordability. It's really important. Unfortunately, with the current administration and what's happening, although I don't believe vinyl is tariffed, but I think because a lot of these customs and agencies have been kind of gutted, or maybe they're required to do more than they had to do in years past. I'm finding now that a lot of the records I have made, they're made in France. So the last 3 things I did, sat on a loading dock for 3 weeks. I did one record recently that was on a loading dock, got completely wet, got fucked up. By the time I got them, a lot of the product was, and I call it product, they're records, but a lot of it was fucking damaged. I wouldn't give it to someone for free, let alone try to charge them $15 fucking dollars for it. And it was a lot of the pressing, and again, it's like to have to take a hit like that on one record when I need the money from that one to do the next one is fucking hard. It's difficult. So I look for affordability. Obviously I look for quality, right? And with a 45, it's even more imperfect than the LP in terms of sound quality, but we don't truly love records because they sound better. I mean, yes, they do sound better. They sound better to me. They sound better to a lot of us that like records, but I think we just made up in our mind we love this fucking thing. And even if it's weird to think it, you're gonna get a piece of fucking, some kind of petroleum product, and you're gonna fucking press it with a fucking mold, and then you're gonna take that mold and then put it on a spinning plate and put some fucking needle on it with a fucking diamond, spin it around and use that to recreate the sound of the recording that was made. I mean, it's amazing that they sound as good as they sound. It's crazy. I don't know. I know maybe it's because my lack of completely understanding it as much as I've tried, but it still seems like there's some fucking voodoo going on, like why does it even sound good at all. I don't know.
It is a very
Crazy.
alien concept. I mean, it would
Yeah.
be something out of a sci-fi movie. You pull this black orb from this decorative sleeve, and you know, it really is. Which again is just fascinating for me, and it's also quite timeless. You know,
Yeah.
records that were made 100 years ago can still be accessed on current equipment. And you can't say that for a lot of other formats.
Well, yeah. And you could even almost say this too, which um, some older records sound better than newer records. And why is that? I've heard it's because of maybe the material that is used has been kind of changed a little bit so that it works better to release off of the mold of the stamper. I don't know if that's true. I've heard that that's something. Also, there used to be multiple places that would manufacture the material used for making vinyl records. And now I believe there's maybe one or two. I'm not sure.
Well, I've got a theory on that is that just as a society, we become more okay with a disposable item. Whereas people in the 50s and 60s, if you look at some of those Blue Note records, you know, they were built for quality. They're, you know, and that was a primary focus. Where I think more in current decades, it's been more about profitability and, you know, okay to, you know, have a little bit of a thinner record or a less detail on the process. That wasn't the point.
Yeah.
The point is profitability, where back then it was quality. Hearing Lee Morgan and John Coltrane as clear as you can.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, on a tangent, I'd say, you know, Blue Note 45s are very affordable and they haven't really increased with value the way that the LPs have. And I would say to anyone wanting to start listening to, especially obviously jazz records, it's like starting off with like collecting Blue Note stuff on 45 is really affordable and fun. And there's so much amazing music on that label, obviously. So.
Oh, yeah. It's interesting you brought up the point, and I haven't thought about it till now, with everything that's going on in the world, and especially with records being a petroleum-based product. You know, the gas crunch in 72 or whenever it was, that was the event that ushered in things. I think polystyrene was, you know, all of a sudden became very popular in the set. Correct me if you know differently.
I don't know differently. I know like of the later records, I know that they're using it into the 80s because I have like some ELO 45s that are definitely styrene. So
yeah, because I think also Dynaflex, if you remember Dynaflex. So I think the price of petroleum in the early 70s kind of drove a lot of these vinyl innovations, whether you like them or not, because of the cost offset. So with the current situation, and looks like a lot of petroleum prices are going to start really rising, we may actually be looking at another era of styrene or some other material to make our records.
Yeah, I don't. It's man, what's going on in the world? It's so unsettling, and it's just one thing after another. It really feels like it's impossible to catch your breath, and it's how it affects records is
the least of our worries, almost.
Yes, I don't even think about that. Right?
It sounded selfish right after it came out of my mouth. It's like, yeah, okay. But this is a record podcast, so
yeah, no,
I
mean, everything does, for me, what I saw, and again, I do not find this to be interesting conversation or discussion, but if you and I were hanging out, and I would say that one of the things I see as a problem, and it's just is what it is, but the pressing plants, all the major labels, they had their own pressing plants. They own the property, they own the pressing plants, they own the machines and everything. They could control their profits. They're able to make things as cheaply as possible and kind of control, instead of paying someone else to make their records, they're making their own records. When vinyl kind of was, when CDs, everyone was all in on CDs as far as the major labels, and they were now selling, what, a 25-year-old Meatloaf record that they were selling for $3 a profit. Now they were making these things for pennies on the dollar, and all these old gold and platinum records going gold and platinum once again. They saw this huge, this massive amounts of money come in, And that was right around when bands like my bands, Drive Like Jehu and Rock from the Crypt were getting, picked up by these labels in order to kind of capitalize on what they saw was, just basically trends in music, just as they have always done in the past and continue to do this day. Well, they sold all the real estate and they trashed their machines. They didn't even sell them. They didn't think they were worth anything.
Yeah, they were boat anchors at that point.
Yeah, so they basically dismantled them and sold them as scrap, and then sold the facilities. So now, fast forward now, when I go get a record made, I'm having to compete for time with these people that are making Taylor Swift records or whatever kind of thing, um, and so now they're still selling more vinyl, even though most of those artists don't really care about it. But just because we basically have like 2 record store days a year, and the labels are, those companies are very attentive to that. It seems like you're kind of pushed to the back, priority and wise. And then you have a bunch of smaller pressing plants that have come up, and a lot of them are probably really, really good. It's just, how am I going to know? You know what I mean? It's like, I don't do so many records where I can actually try a different facilities out on, every release. And having a relationship is kind of the most important part of the whole thing. Knowing who's making your records, knowing that you can call them up and everything. So I guess the problem I see is that, like, all those machines aren't there anymore. Now the big boys are like getting their shit made, or like the plebes like me are getting their records done. And it's just harder to kind of maintain like that kind of like, okay, this is a niche thing. This is underground, and that's totally fucking cool. I've always been fine with that, but now just to be like, oh shit, now how do we even make this work? Okay, got to figure that fucking shit out, So
are you finding the lead times are still long for making records these days?
Well, because of that thing I stated earlier about this with the customs being fucked up, and I don't know if other labels have had that problem. I've talked to some people and they have actually said, no, that hasn't happened to me. I don't know, but that throws a monkey wrench in it. So because if you like have it all set up, and let's say you give yourself 2-week lead in order to make the release date, meaning that you have to have records in distribution at a certain date in order so that they can make that ship date to get them into the stores on time, so everything's coordinated. If they're on a loading dock somewhere for an extra couple weeks and you get fucked, this is exactly how you get fucked. So then now your record doesn't come out right when it's supposed to. So now that the distributor has to reservice orders and say, okay, your record didn't get there, total credit, don't pay for those things. But now we're going to take reorders based on this release date. This always happens. Once that happens, stores do not take the same amount of records as they would have on that first initial order. For some reason, it's always lower, at least in my experience. It's always a lot lower. So let's say the distributor says, we think we can sell 600 of these. Rad. Here's 600. And then they come back and go, okay, you didn't make it on time. Then they come back and go, oh, well, now we only have orders for like 300. And you're like, okay. Like, if you would have known that was the case, you would have made that many in the first place,
Yeah.
So that is something that has happened to me a couple times. And that's how you get fucked on that, because it's all just about, every record is out of print, basically. You make them. It's not like, oh, hey, Manny, we need 50 more copies, A kid in Jersey wants one. Make one up right now. Every record, once it's made, is basically out of print, right? I mean, it's been printed. It's either available or not available, So the whole notion of like, out of print. Yeah, everything's fucking out of print. Limited. Yeah, everything's fucking limited. It's all limited. It's all out of print. It's all limited, not a print.
Yeah. No, I can see that. And also you have the marketing and any costs in that and getting the word out that this record's coming out.
Well, I gave up on that because it's expensive. You're adding another $4,000 onto a record that doesn't have a chance of even, breaking even. So it's like, fuck that. I just stopped doing it. And it's also like that shit makes putting out records not fun. So that's just what it is. If I'm working with the band where that's important to them, of course, I'll work with them and we'll come up with some ideas to try to help get the word out. But ultimately, whether it's my bands and the records I put out or some other bands, it's like the band, the artist is always the one that seems to be the one responsible for creating the interest in their music. No matter what label any of my bands have been on, it's always been, well, what can they really do? You can't, I've been on a label that tried to pay people to like us, and that didn't work. So,
when it comes to Swami Records, it's very important that the object has this importance, this reverence to it. Is there a record that you're particularly proud of the way that it's come together?
I'm proud of all of them. I'm really proud of the records that I do with other bands, of my own music. I'm proud of it all. Pride is a weird word, but I do take pleasure in the fruits of the work and the efforts that it took to put something together, and to have that kind of article, have that like kind of document. Here it is. I mean, I know nothing is permanent, but just to think that like, okay, this kind of represents that art. I do look at it as an artistic endeavor, and putting out records is more like the actual art project of kind of presenting it, whereas actually making the song seems to be a much more personal and introspective part of the process, and one that is seems more, for me at least, more individual in terms of like my interaction with the music and whatnot. Whereas putting out records is less serious. It's more, I can have a little bit more fun with it, because it's like the music's always already there. I'm just trying to surface it and not fuck it up, and just kind of make it available to those people who want it, and I do consider the people who like the records I put out, even if I don't know all of them, I think we're connected by something, or I feel that like we have a commonality and we're more similar than different. So it's like, even if they're not my friends, I, tend to think of them as friends, because we're connected by this thing, which is like, we dig the same kind of noise.
Yeah. So, and again, maybe I worded the question strangely. I totally get the being proud of everything, but is there a record or a package that you think of as like, wow, that was a moment where it all came together in a very unique way?
Well, visually packaging, it's like with Dry Lake Jehu and Hot Snakes and working with Rick would just pull things, always, whether it's also vocally, but would pull things out of his like bag of tricks that kind of like was always just always kind of took me aback, and really made me just like completely in awe of his creativity and his talents, and how it always his contributions and the collaboration completely elevated anything I did, beyond any expectation that I could possibly have. So yeah, I love the way all those Hot Snakes records look. I think they're so badass. They're so cool. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's like, as far as packaging go, I tend to, if you see the Swami stuff that I do, I tend to be pretty fucking cut and dry. I rarely will put a lyric sheet in. Like I said, with the 45s, a lot of times I'll just accompany a white sleeve, just because, or sometimes I'll just use a rubber stamp and stamp on it, just because I like the idea of everyone being a little bit different. I did a night during COVID, I did a Night Marchers live record that we had recorded, multi-tracked it at a bar that I used to be a partner in, called Bar Pink. And it was Night Marchers at Bar Pink. And I went to a local record store here in town, Folk Arts, one of the top three.
I love that spot. Yep.
Yeah. So, and Brandon hooked me up with a bunch of kind of asked out LP covers that were destined for the bin. So he said, like, yeah, come and grab them and take them. And I did, and spray painted the covers so everyone was a bit different, and Yeah, that's just something I like. I like the idea of every record being a little bit different. It's not really feasible when you start making more than like a couple hundred. I mean, it's feasible, just fucking takes for fucking ever, you know. Um, Pretty soon you're like, I'm in the spray paint business. I'm not really in the record business, you know. But it's fun. You know, there's a band from San Diego that inspired me a lot in that regard. Truman's Water. Have you ever heard of them
I
before?
don't think so. I have no.
Truman's Water. They were around in the very late 80s, but they're most popular in the oh no, maybe they started right around 90, 91. I'm not sure, but right around 1990, like five, they had got very popular in the UK. They were John Peel's favorite band at the time, as he stated many times. And but they would do that. They would get like thrash records and throw away the vinyl and put their own record inside and kind of do these cool and creative things, you know. I just thought that was cool, very personal
Yeah.
and fun, you know.
Yeah, I've seen that happen with Melvins and how Mackie does silk screening over some Roy Acuff album cover.
Yeah.
You know,
Do you buy any Jamaican records at all?
I don't. You know, it's
So there's like
I don't know a whole
like,
lot about it. That's why. Yeah.
there's like so many times like I don't see them very much anymore, but you would look at the inside of an LP sleeve and it was literally like a calendar that they just kind of flipped their way, glued together, and then printed on the outside. Stuff like that I think is just so cool, you know.
Oh, that's funny because I know
Yeah,
here in
really neat.
Australia, especially in the 70s, definitely in the 80s, they'd print the record sleeves in the same factory that they made like breakfast cereal boxes. Which is why they're so thin, you know. Those old, you know, just the paper that's used, you could totally tell if it's a Australian or a non-Australian press through that. So,
Oh, that's cool.
yeah, is there a record label that you took more lessons from than others for Swami Records?
I don't know. I mean, it's like as far as like, I mean, what are the great labels in the United States? It's like lots of good ones. I mean, you look at like on like as far as like the classic labels like Atlantic and Ahmet Ertegun and this and reading about kind of how they want to how they I mean they were an indie label when they started and how they kind of their vision for embracing this music that was not particularly mainstream at the time and how they kind of leveraged that and how they made their records and how resourceful they were in the very beginning. Yeah, I mean, I'm interested in all the lore. You know, as a kid, it was obviously, if you would have asked me when I was in in fifth grade, what is your favorite label? I would have said, oh, Casablanca, they're the best. You know why? Well, because Kiss was on it. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
I didn't know that Donna Summer was on it too, or whatever, you know. It's like, I just knew Kiss was on it, you know. And then there becomes a time, and for me, it was simultaneous with getting into punk rock music where you started the names on the back of the record and the label and all that stuff became much more important. You know, labels like SST and Discord and Touch and Go became like, okay, now I'm just going to buy, Homestead.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just going to buy anything on these labels because they have some bands on these labels that I like. So you just kind of buy it all. And then, every once in a while you buy a Tom Tricoli's Dog and you're like, oh, fuck, or whatever. But for the most part, you're stoked just to know that, like, okay, you're associating this label, these names on the back, as being something that is like a group of people, a creative force doing something really cool and that you find interesting. So
from my perspective, it's to me, it reminds me a lot of Discord. It's largely regionally based music. It has a central quality control in that, for Discord it's Ian, for Swami it's you, and it's legacy in terms of building that trust. So when you buy something from Discord, you kind of know what it's going to sound like, or have an idea. I think same with Swami, the same sensibilities. When you pick up a Swami record, it's obviously you're into something that's going to be a little bit more garagey, more unique, high energy in that area. That to me has almost been a bit of a parallel. I don't know if you'd agree with that or not.
I mean, I take it as a compliment for sure. I mean, the label continues to be, a source of inspiration for me and the people you're involved in not only putting out the records, but the bands on the label, the aesthetic, everything. Rick and I were very much into that. When we were doing Pitchfork, our first band together, and that was, a massive influence. Cannot overstate that.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that, like, for a label, I don't consider Swami to be like nearly as busy as a label like that. Fine, although I'm always thinking of the next release, it really does seem like a one thing at a time for me, because there's only so much I can do, and my resources are a bit limited. But I can say that, like, that I definitely would say that label would be a big influence on the way I do things, for sure.
Or the Cramps, Vengeance.
Yeah.
I think they kind of had a very similar kind of business model. Let's make one, sell a bunch, sell as much as we can to fund the next one.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I love the idea of the label, someone looking at Swami Records and thinking that it has an identity, and hopefully a good one at that. But that would be, I would see that as a success for sure.
Yeah. And, your name on the back of something is a bit of a stamp of quality in itself.
I hope so, or hope not. I don't know.
Yeah.
It depends on who says it, I guess.
So in the Interscope years, the CDs of, Rocket from the Crypt were pressed and sold by Interscope, but the records, the vinyl, was still sold through Headhunter, Cargo, Sympathy of the Record Industry. Was there insistence that it had to be on vinyl, and Interscope just didn't want to deal with it? They just allowed.
They would have done whatever we wanted, but what I mean, they were bending over backwards just to put out our records. I mean, that's why we ended up putting out records with them, is because they went above and beyond what anyone else would do. Nothing we could pitch them on was too wild. They were just yes about everything. But specific to Drive Like Jehu and Rock from the Crypt, both bands were under contract with Cargo.
Mm-hmm.
Not as much Headhunter. I mean, Headhunter was owned by Cargo Records. So I could be wrong. It was a while ago. It was my understanding that as part of the agreement between Interscope and Cargo, which we had nothing to do with, that was an agreement between them, was that Cargo would retain the vinyl and Interscope would additionally buy the bands out of their contracts to Cargo. Yeah. And I think they also bought an actual record off of Cargo too. They bought Circa Now off of Cargo, who then re-released it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so the Boy Chucker single, was that was all independent before Interscope came in, or was that,
or even if it was during,
arrangement?
that would have been that. Even if it was during, that would have been something. I mean, I think that was kind of happening simultaneously. Actually, I think we were talking with them while we had hanging out with Long Gone and doing. I mean, we did more than just that one record with them. We did a couple. We did the 10-inch as well. The 10-inch record would have been something that would have come out after the State of Arts on Fire would have come out after our agreement with Interscope, definitely. And that was just something because we wanted to do the record with Long Gone. That's all it was.
Mm-hmm. And some of the singles like Gold, which I think some of them came with a string of beads.
The beads.
Yeah. You guys did have different gimmicks. That was kind of more of a merch table thing, or
no? That was 100% Darren Mock. He had a label called. He is a good friend, and it was his idea. The whole thing was his brainchild, was for us to cover not only cover MC5, but them at their most kind of free jazz, loose, unconstructed, kind of version of the band, which was the song Gold, which was a song used, it was off of the soundtrack, was recorded for a soundtrack of a movie. And so the whole thing was his idea, and he was starting this label, and that was, I believe that was his first release, if not his first, one of his first.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that would never have been anything that we would have even sold. He gave us copies and maybe we sold some of them, but for the most part, it was something that he just, he sold.
Mm. So I would imagine you and your cohort were quite into record collecting at this time, because this is early 90s.
The early 90s was kind of a weird time.
The nadir of records, pretty much.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I was buying records from the 90s in the 90s, as opposed to like now buying records from the 50s and 60s in the 2026s. But and I say that okay, so this is what I specifically mean by that. So and Rock from the Crypt and Drive Like Jew are no exception to this. But back then, you could make a record. We've talked about the cost of putting out records. You could make a 45 really cheap, and hey, you can make 1,000 cheap. But why make 1,000 cheap when you can make a 5,000 for the same 5,000 for the same price or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not literally the same price, but the break would
marginally
just
more, yeah.
Right. So all of those Rocket records and the Drive Like Jehu single and the whatever the band was, they made probably about 3,000 at least of any of those. When I do a 45 now, I'm doing 500. And even that doesn't go away necessarily in the blink of an eye. But as a collector, and I've never said this out loud because I've never actually formulated this into words, but I feel that as a collector, I would rather make it less available, especially if it means like not have to sit on them for a long time and have them just like in my closet. Like I have closets full of records that nobody wants now, I'd rather make less, burn through those ones, make them available. And if that does make them more valuable, then I like the fact that people who are buying the stuff right now, if they decide to sell it later and make whatever happens with it. But I like the idea of that record not being worthless,
mm-hmm.
like in the future, which so many records I made basically are. I mean, dude, that is the fucking fact. I have records that are like, they're 35 years old. They go for like 49 cents and shit like that. And that's fine. I get it. But it's because they made too fucking many of them,
Yeah.
That's what it is. And that wasn't a decision that I was a part of,
Yeah. And then you have something like the Pusshead single where there's 75. And
I thought there was 10.
Okay.
I didn't know there was all of 75 of them.
Well, apparently there was 75. Who knows if they
I
all
have
got
one.
there? Okay, all right. Because those,
I have one.
Yeah, one of those is definitely buy a nice used Nissan with one of those. I think there's also a benefit, as I understand. There's a psychic benefit as well, because you don't have a closet or a garage full of unsold product. You can very quickly kind of move on to something else after you've kind of left that one in the rearview mirror.
Because it's always about the next thing. That's what it is. It's always about the next thing. I mean, you got to keep swimming, and that's the fun of this whole thing, is the next thing. You don't sit back and listen to some fucking record you made 100 times, like go, that was the greatest moment of my life. The
Mm-hmm.
greatest moments are still ahead of us. You keep doing the next thing.
And what is the next thing, John?
The next thing is there's a Swami, immediately there's a Sultan's reissue coming out of the first Sultan's record. There is a Mrs. Magician record that I'm really excited about, LP. There is a new Swami John Reis record that I'm working on right now. Hopefully there's a Schizophonics record in the works. We've been talking about it. I'm excited about that.
Is it all recorded, just ready to go, or what's happening with that?
And no, it has not been recorded, and I don't want to get too ahead of myself because I don't know exactly where they're at, but we've talked about it and it seems like something that's going to happen. And I don't think I'm speaking completely, out of turn by mentioning that, but it seems like something that, we're all working towards. And I think that's what it is. I mean, the band is incredibly busy. They work harder than any band any band that I know. They're always all about the Schizophonics being on tour. And if they're not doing that, they're doing their, soul cover band, or they had like a kind of disco cover band they did recently. And I mean, there's just always something with them, or they're doing, COVID Cola with Robert. They're just, they're very creative people. They're very busy. They're all about, rock and roll, 24/7. So I think they're just kind of like working on the songs right now.
I've seen a lot of bands, and I've never seen a band that leaves it so on the stage as the Schizophonics. They are incredible.
I just did this at like a little bit of an experiment. I took a scale to one of their shows, and I stood on it right before they played it. I'm a little bit embarrassed. I don't want to say what the weight was. It was not where I want to be. But then when they were done, I stood on it again, and I weighed 6 pounds less.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So they're not only a band, but they're a diet plan.
They are. So just by watching them, you can lose weight.
Oh, I need him to tour again then. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to put links right now. Swami Records. There's only a few things for sale. Recently, I think there were some hits. The Monkey Island series. I
had a couple of those. That was one of the Rocket put out a bunch of would do kind of records around tours and whatnot, and that was a release of 6-7 inches that we did around a tour of Ireland and the UK, and it was 1 7-inch per each city that we played, covering a song by a band from that city. And I had a couple left over that I've had for a while, and I just did a whole thing with just because I was releasing 2 new 45s, so I decided I'll put these other 45s that I had limited quantities of up for sale as well. So yeah. That was
Are those vinyl or are those lathe cuts?
Those are records. Okay. I don't know how many we made. I think we probably, since we were selling them just at the gigs, I can't imagine making more than 300 or 400 for each one, because they're only meant to be sold at that gig. It just at the end we had some leftovers that didn't sell.
So again, John, I'm so glad we were able to get it together and make this happen. I also want to remind folks of the 3rd anniversary of the Punk Rock Museum on April 4th. So Spike and the Gimme Gimmes, Kate Clover, XCOM, River Rats,
cool.
And the Whops from the UK. So I'll put the link in this episode page, which is thepunkrockmuseum.com. Do you have a favorite exhibit or something in the Punk Rock Museum that fascinates you more than others?
I did a couple of days of tours there, so I am pretty familiar with the exhibit. I know it does change. For me, it's all about just that very first room, or with the stuff with a couple Suicide Flyers and Velvet Underground stuff, the Ramones. It's all downhill after that room.
That first bit, yeah. That flyer with naked Iggy Pop. That always makes me feel inferior. Well, Swami John, thank you so much for coming on the show, mate. We really appreciate it. And if there's any records you need from Australia, you let me know.
I have a list.
Yeah, please do. Please share it. Is there any grails you're looking for anywhere in the world?
Oh man, there's a lot. There are a lot of records. I think there's about 5,000 records that I'm looking for. And those are the ones that I know I'm looking for. Like I said, there's a lot of shit out there that I'm looking for that I don't know that I'm looking for it until I find it, All
right. Well, keep swimming in the ocean, man.
Yeah, indeed.
All right.
And keep buying records. Records are great.
I think there's maybe 30-35% chance I'll probably die in a record store. And that would be fine.
Yeah. especially for the people that work there.
Oh yeah. I'm sure they've seen worse. All right, Joe. You take care, mate.
All right, later, man.
Cheers.
Bye.
Ah, wonderful man, that Swami John Reis. You know, there are people that I admire, and then people where that admiration borders slightly on jealousy, and that is Swami John Reis. He does such a damn good job. It's almost kind of like, oh man, I'm so glad someone's doing it. Watching him go, it's always a pleasure. And whatever he puts out on his records, you can almost guarantee to just fucking rock. So thank you, John. I really appreciate you spending time with us, and look forward to speaking with you another time. I'm sure I'd love to have a part 2 and really continue to nerd out on some of that record collecting juju that seems to be going around. And that's it for this episode of The Vinyl Guide. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thanks to everyone who's sharing these episodes on social media, Reddit forums, Facebook groups. That is appreciated. And those of you who are helping support this podcast at patreon.com/vinylguide. Well, that is so goddamn cool. Really do appreciate you peoples. And we'll be back shortly with a brand new episode. So until we talk next time, you all behave yourselves. And thanks again for listening to the Vinyl Guide podcast. Cheers.